and welcome back on Take a Look, the EPP's interview series on the EU digital policy agenda and what our priorities should be. Today we're going to discuss standards, China and critical technologies, and what's the link between all that? Well, we're going to take a look with Cedric Amon. Hello Cedric, welcome and thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Hello, and thank you very much to you and your team for having me today.
So you are a research associate working on trade and digitalization at the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, joining us today from Switzerland. And today we'd like to find out more about your recent publication on the geopolitics of digital standards, China's role in standard-setting organizations. Now, the study for our audience here was ordered by the Multilateral Dialogue Geneva of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and carried out by Diplo Foundation and its Geneva Internet platform. Now, my first question about this study is why is it so important to discuss digital standards, especially in the context of the global tech race, as we call it, and why should we be specifically concerned with this growing involvement of China and its strategy within standard-setting organizations, which you describe in your report?
Well, before I get started, I would like to thank Sorina Teleanu and the Diplo Foundation, who have conducted a really comprehensive work on the matter of standardization, China's role in Genevan or international standardization organizations. I think it's a topic that became increasingly prominent with cases of Huawei and 5G infrastructure and also facial recognition standards that were being set. And the reason why we talk about standards or why it is important to acknowledge them in the standard race is that, first of all, standards have huge economic benefits. In Germany, they represent around 17 billion euros alone per year. The second element would be that it is now possible to reshuffle the deck. We're at the verge of new technologies being implemented, artificial intelligence becoming ever more present, and Internet of Things, all of these technologies. So there is an open race to become the first mover and establish themselves. And then finally, the third point would be the dual use of technologies. We're now merging those technologies are becoming ever more present. They're not as separate anymore, where you could say, well, this is purely an industry-related topic, or this is purely that. And if we're talking about the concerns, or I would say vigilance, to acknowledge what is happening, is that we can take China's goal at face value, which is to become a market leader in artificial intelligence and innovation technologies by 2035, and also become one of the leading industrial producers by 2049. So we know that this is a goal, and they have been very effective in streamlining this through different organizations and being very present. Also filling a void that in certain standardization organizations have been created by some of the companies and actors, purely also from our societies leaving and preferring other venues. And we should also not forget that China is not any competitor. It has state-led mechanisms. It is able to, again, as I mentioned, coordinate and streamline these efforts, but also the government has a say and knows where it wants to go with this. Another point that I would make in why we should care about this is we as Europeans must be ready to play, to be part of what is happening, to be present in these organizations, to also counter proposals, to have our own proposals, to make sure that the standards of tomorrow also still reflect the values and beliefs that we have, especially when we're talking about issues such as facial recognition. I think this is a very prominent and also tangible case. And also consider that through initiatives such as the Belt and Road, but also through bilateral trade agreements, China's increasingly including clauses that make reference to national standards being exported. So there is a whole new market segment being opened on the basis of national standards and not the international ones.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's very interesting, and I mean, your response packs a lot. But I'd like to circle back, especially to what you said about China. Now, as some our audience might know, we at the EPP published papers on EU-China relations as well as on trade, and in those papers we highlighted that we should kind of renew or redefine our relations and our approach towards China, particularly based on a joint vision with our partners for addressing the economic and the systemic challenges that the growth of China is raising. But in your study, you recommend ways for governments and other organizations to respond to this growing influence in shaping digital standards, and also how we can maintain the overall integrity of our standardization frameworks. So what would be your advice, in a few words, for the policymakers watching us to specifically address these issues around standard setting?
Yeah, a few things that we've observed and also included in the report would be to strengthen a overall active participation in international standardization organizations. So not only from state actors or private actors, but really the whole range, being from academia, civil society. I think this is really helpful because this is such a complex topic that you need all the information you can get and pool that information together. So it was also in the standardization strategy of the EU, it was already mentioned to have such a platform for actors to exchange. And I think that is a very welcome and much needed initiative in that direction. Another element would be to strengthen the coordination of like-minded states. This is a topic that especially we see here in international Geneva, where the coordination among EU countries is usually very tight. But this is an issue that affects it more than just of the EU. Another point that I'd like to make is to really involve the industry. The industry has the technical expertise. I understand that there are concerns about politicizing the issue of standards too much, because at the core they are technical solutions to technical problems, as I've heard recently. But I think, as I mentioned before, with the dual use of technologies and these new possibilities coming up, they will be more and more politicized, and I think they need to be reference terms of knowing what might be relevant, what might be an issue in the future, so that they can be flagged also, so that there can be also a dialogue between those communities. Accelerating standardization negotiations, because I think that's also making it more attractive for industry to come to international SDOs, as we call them, standardization organizations, because this is really important to make sure that they are negotiated on an international basis and that they are recognized. I mentioned that China, on one hand, is able to have a very coordinated approach. I think the EU can also have a very stringent approach. We have very powerful tools that are coming into action this year, the Digital Market Act, the Digital the DSA, sorry. So I think in those terms, it would be important to make sure that standardization is reflected in that, but also that they tie together very much so. So not that they are individual separate pieces of legislation. And finally, I would like to make the point of closing the standardization gap. it is a very important element to take into consideration. If we're going too much at two different speeds, there will be cases in which some countries, some states, some actors will prefer to go to venues that they know and that they have also more of a say in. And therefore, I think it is very important to take into account all these actors that want to shape the standards of tomorrow at the end.
Thank you very much, Cedric. And I like what you said about the role of industry and clear vision of the EU being important, coordinated approach, and the importance of partnerships. Now, thanks a lot for bringing to our attention this topic that isn't discussed enough, in my view. I have one last very quick question for you, a bit more informal. I was wondering if you could tell us more about the kind of internet user that you are, if you're more about podcast or social media or streaming or things like that.
Yes, I think I can definitely say that I'm very much on the podcast side of the internet. I've just discovered that you can do many things, waking up to breakfast while listening to, I don't know, some of the global news, and also in terms of tech, it's really become my source of choice.
Thank you very much. I'm also part of that club. Thank you, Cedric, for joining today and for all the things we've learned. Thanks to you. And thank you all for following. I hope that you've learned a thing or two like me. Thank you and see you next time.